Welcome to month 10 of Cheshire Quilters Guild 2017 Block of the Month. This month we're assembling the center of our quilts, and what you see is where I have laid out the 9-inch squares on point setting. So I've got 2 of each block from months 1 through 9, and I have laid it out in the order that it's written out on the instructions. So starting at the upper left hand corner, that's my row 1, which is just a corner triangle. Row 2, I've left a space, and there's row 2. It's got a cornerstone, a sashing rectangle, and a cornerstone. Row 3 is a setting triangle, sashing, around the world block, sashing, and a setting triangle. I'd like you to notice how I've laid out the setting triangles. If you'll notice, I've got this short square edge lined up where that right corner is. I've got that lined up with the bottom of the sashing, in the same way up here. And that's how I'm going to line up those pieces when I sew them together. So I'm going to have a little bit of triangle sticking out at the upper end. That's okay. If we go down a little further, we can see I've done the same thing with the next row of blocks. Lined up that square edge and that square edge. These setting triangles, these two and these two, are on the left and the top of the quilt. When a setting triangle is on the left or top of the quilt, I'm going to line it up with the bottom of the sashing. So when we get down to the row 7, which is this third row of blocks, you can see I've done the same thing with this one. It's on the left side of the quilt, so I'm lining it up with the bottom of the block. The other end of that row is a corner triangle, and the corner triangle I'm going to center. It's going to be slightly longer than the sashing rectangle, and I'm going to center it on the sashing rectangle. But be careful. This is a bias edge. Don't stretch it. Just very gently lay it on top and kind of even out how much of the triangle sticks out on either side. When we go down to the 4th row that has blocks in it, which is row 9, now I've got a setting rectangle that's on the right hand side of the quilt. So now I'm going to line up the square corner of my setting triangle with the upper edge of this sashing rectangle. The other end of that row has the corner triangle. So again, without stretching this bias edge, I'm going to lay it on top of that sashing and center it as best I can when I sew them together. The row 11 again has setting triangles on either end. Now they're at the bottom and the right hand side, so I line the square corner of those triangles up with the top of my sashing, and I do the same thing again over here in row 13, sorry, I can't count. So this is on the left, this one's on the right, this one's on the bottom, so I line up the top edge of the sashing with the square corner of those triangles. And finally, the very last row is a corner triangle, so it's going to, when you sew the rows together, you're going to center it along the sashing piece. Be very careful with every setting triangle and corner triangle as you sew them to other pieces, because the edges that you're sewing are biased. So this is a bias edge and this is a bias edge because of the way we cut these out of the larger squares. The reason we're doing that is so that we have a nice straight of grain on grain edge at the outside. Will make our life so much simpler when we go to add our borders. So let me sew these rows together and then we'll look at how the rows look. Here are all the rows of the on point setting stitched together. Now I followed my pressing instructions, so everything is pressed, all the seams are pressed toward the sashing rectangles. So I'm now going to be able to very easily nest the seams and stitch the rows together. There is the on point center all put together. Just see the rest of it. Now you'll notice that there's the little squares are sticking out on the end of all the rows. Well, that's on purpose. We have one thing left to do for this, and that is to trim all of the edges. Those corner triangles and setting triangles are slightly oversized, so we're going to trim them down so that everything has a 1/4 of an inch seam, so next month when we go to put on the borders it's going to work out perfect. I'll see you at the cutting table. I'll show you an example of trimming up a corner triangle and a setting triangle. Welcome back. Now we're going to trim up these, both of these sides. What we're going to do is we're going to use our rulers, 1/4 inch lines. We're going to use the 1/4 inch lines. I've got a big square ruler because I want to do this corner triangle. So anything that was probably 9 by 9 would work for this. But the key is we want to line up the 1/4 inch seam right on the ends, those points of the setting rectangles. And we want to do that both on this side and the other side. And when you get it positioned where you think it's good, we're going to go through and we're just going to trim from square to square. We're not going to worry about the rest of the side yet. So there's that corner squared up. And we'll do that same thing on all 4 corners. To trim up a setting triangle, let me just move this up where you can see it. There's a setting triangle. Now when I go to try and use my 12.5 inch ruler, that's not long enough. So what we need to do is get a longer ruler. I have a 24.5 inch, but I'm only going to worry about from one square to the next. So let me just reposition this so you can see there's one square over here on the left hand side and this one down here on the right hand side. And I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm going to take the 1/4 inch line on the ruler and I'm going to line it up on the points of my sashing. And when I do that, you see I've got a little strip to trim on that rectangle. And we'll just continue to do this all the way around the quilt. Okay, I've got all my 4 corners trimmed and the 10 setting triangles. Look at those nice straight edges. So it's all ready for next month's installment to put on the borders. Next up, let's look at how the straight setting works. Here is the 9-inch straight set for month 10. Be creative and rearrange the blocks as you see fit. I've arranged mine in the order shown on the design. I'll come back when I have it all sewn together and you can see what it looks like then. There are the 7 rows of the straight set sewn together. I pressed all the seams towards the sashing rectangle, so it's going to be very easy to nest the seams and sew the rows together. Be back when I have that done. And there you have the 9 block straight setting for month 10 of Cheshire Quilters Guild block of the month. Next month we'll be putting on the borders. See you then.